Hello.
Hi, Amy.
How is your Wednesday going?
It's going fine. I mean, it's fairly quiet for a release management day,
Nice.
so I could spend some time on registry tasks.
Okay.
Which was nice.
Okay. That's good. That's good. Hello, everyone. Hey, Scarbeck. Haven't seen you since I returned. Have you moved your plant, or did it grow like a foot?
So this plant used to be sitting on my desk, and it's gotten to the point where it was almost touching the ceiling when the desk was in the standing position. So I repotted it. So, when I sit down, it's as tall as me, but, it's probably like 4 feet high.
Nice.
Cats like to play with it at this point. So it's slowly, the lower leaves and some of the leaves that are right next to where my desk is are slowly being eaten over the course of time.
So we don't have anything on the agenda at the moment, but is there anything people would like to go through, demo or discuss or generally cover?
I personally do not know what to demo at this moment in time. Much of the pages work I've been doing has been mostly contributions towards the Helm chart. And because I'm still waiting for reviews, I haven't had any ability to move forward with doing any sort of testing and pre-prod yet. So I don't really have anything to show for.
Okay. How about, I have a question. What about the issue, Scarlett, that you asked me about prioritizing? The registry one,
Where we had the
Migrations.
migrations happening
yeah,
on
would
every
it be
single
worth?
job.
Yeah. So I think it's a good call, Scarbeck, that we should improve things before we go ahead and move into production. But do we have a is Graham's comment there? Is that the approach that makes sense for solving this? Yeah.
I think it's an approach that we could run by the distribution team.
Okay.
I was trying to think of what would be potential problems would run into that. And the only thing I could think of off the top of my head is if the migrations fail for any reason, what does Helm do in that particular case? Because the job failed, but that's not going to stop Helm from keeping on going and deploying the new registry code, I think.
It's stopping it from deploying. I mean,
so if the job fails, Helm will just stop everything
just
else.
sit there for an hour and wait. So, I mean, we had this in staging, and I tried to enable the metadata database there, that the migration jobs didn't work because we had a special car in the password, which the charts can't deal with because they use some scripting magic, unfortunately. And so I opened an issue for that in the charts to fix this. And the short fix was to change the password to not contain the special character. But what happened was that the DB migration jobs always were spinning up, trying to connect to the database with the wrong password, and then failing to authenticate, and then they're terminating and then going into a crash loop, right? Always retrying. And so it never got forward to deploy registry to a new version.
So then brainstorm with me for a split second, because one of the items that we're thinking about doing is removing the atomic flag from our Helm configuration, which means we're not going to wait any longer. We're instead going to generate a diff. We're going to run the upgrade, and we're going to have another tool come in and say, hey, we're doing this. That way we have a log inside of our CI job that tells us what step we're on during the deployment process. And at that point, when we go forward with this option, there's not going to be any automatic rollback. It's just going to move forward. And if things fail, they're going to be stuck in that failed state until something else is to intervene, whether that be a new deployment or a rollback or what have you. So in that particular scenario, what's going to happen? Like the new job will probably fail, but will Helm continue with attempting to deploy the new pods?
I'm not sure. I mean, the thing is, it first tries to run the migration jobs. And I think everything else is depending on that, right? And if the migration job fails, and so it gets into a crash loop, it would just spin around until Helm gives up, right? And then nothing else would happen.
But these are two distinct objects, right? Like the migrations are a job, whereas the deployment is still its own separate item. So I wonder, how do we connect the jobs and deployment together to tell Helm, make sure you run this job before anything else? Are we using some sort of like pre-hook or something?
I'm not sure how this is working exactly.
We should try to figure that out.
Maybe even the registry pods were upgraded. I'm not sure now, thinking about it. I mean, I just know that the spinning up the job failed with a pod crash loop, but I'm not sure if maybe the registry containers maybe have been upgraded. But then they would have also been in a crash loop because they also would probably try to connect to the database. I'm not sure about this, to be honest.
So how about this? So Amy, the proposal that Graham created is a relatively easy looking proposal. It's just a matter of thinking through all the failure scenarios. That's a merge request that we could quickly create, and we could start the conversation as to what options we have if that merge request is not the appropriate method of going about this idea. So maybe I could work on that a little bit later today.
Yeah, that would be super helpful. Yeah, I think Craig's original point is very true, right? Which is this stuff is noisy and makes it easier to miss other stuff. So it would be good to solve this. Cool. Yeah, that would be great, Scarbeck, if you could have a shot at that.
Okay, good, because what I'm currently working on is kind of boring me at the moment.
Are you working on the AppDex stuff?
The AppDex has been frustrating because I don't know what to look at. And then the other thing I'm doing is the console readiness review, and that's just documentation. It's just sucking the life out of me.
Oh.
Henry, there's a merge request I have assigned to you for review, by the way.
I saw this. I just finished the first part of the readiness review for registry, so I can now start with the next readiness review of the runbook. Yeah, I will pick that up.
Okay. Awesome. Great. Are there any other things, like maybe anything around registry, that would be useful for us to discuss?
Not really on a Kubernetes side right now, just some more work popped up around backups, which still needs to be accomplished because the R replica nodes, like the archive and delete replica nodes, still need to be synced. And this is depending on wall archiving to be fixed, which is an issue which I assigned to Alejandro. And then we also need to set up a pipeline for regular backup testing once database backups are working, where we have a project for which we use for our other backups, but this needs to be adjusted to the register DB. So there's some work that still needs to be done. I created issues for that, but nothing Kubernetes related right now.
Cool. Okay, good to know.
One more thing. Okay, we also need to enable the database for registry in the new canary staging environment still. So it's not enabled there, but we should do this now.
Cool. Okay, sounds good. And then the other thing I can give an update on is Redis. So here we go. So there are various Redis projects going on at the moment. So let me just link this in. So scalability is working at the moment to do various things like short-term improving Redis performance and ability to scale. Now, the one that's most useful or most relevant to us is going to be the So should we just quickly, oh, it's not on here. So it'll be it's the final sentence is we have a shared OKR with scalability, which is around working out the long-term strategy for Redis. There is an assumption at this stage that migrating to Kubernetes will be a good way to improve scaling, but it also has some complexity and we need to validate that. So there is going to be a project starting up quite soon, like hopefully in the next couple of weeks, to start putting together some POCs of how this, like what this might look like with Redis on a cluster or other options. At the moment, that is going to mostly be handled within scalability. Igor is going to be working on that as well. And Graham is going to be advising on that from a delivery perspective. So we have some visibility. We won't be super hands-on at this stage, and that will give us some space to go through pages and complete the registry phase, and also continue on some of this tech debt work that Graham's working on. So just some visibility as we get this epic built out. I can share more. The rough idea is that this quarter we work out like how do we want to scale Redis, and then in Q4 we actually start like doing the work. So we'll be much more hands-on through Q4 helping out on this.
I'm amused at how many Redis clusters we need to run a .com installation of GitLab.
Yes.
Speaking of capacity limits and multiple Redis things, something I just want to bring the attention to since we're here, and this is going to be disastrous if we don't figure out how to fix this at some point in time. I just put the link. So item number 4, we didn't do a good job planning the IP address space for our zonal clusters. So we're limited to 250-ish nodes in each of our zonal clusters. And at the time that Jarv created this issue, we're running between 130 and 135 nodes. So we're not in an emergency situation yet, but we're using more than half the capacity of available nodes that we're allowed to run inside of these networks, which is not good. This is not a simple configuration change. This is a bash and recreate each of these clusters.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we have 2 problems that we need to solve for. One is finding the network space, because currently I don't believe we have it. I have not done a thorough investigation, but we should be able to reclaim some address spacing because we've migrated off of various virtual machine fleets. Hypothetically, we could probably move other components or other networking spaces into different areas, because I know for like the console is a perfect example where we have this massive 256 block carved out for a single node. Completely useful.
Mm-hmm.
The deploy nodes fall into that same category. So stuff like that we could probably adjust to help us here, but we need to find the network space, and then we need to figure out a migration strategy to recreate a new cluster and then move the traffic to it and get ourselves off the old cluster, which is using an ill-defined network space. So
okay. And
I don't know how to prioritize this.
Am I right in thinking that when we rebuild the cluster, we would have to at least temporarily have a different name for the cluster, and then that would affect all of our monitoring?
Yes. This is going to be very difficult. Excuse me, because a lot of networking components, we have a lot of IP addresses. Goodness. We have a lot of IP addresses that are specific to this network space. And I feel like when we do this migration, we're going to be challenging ourselves to create interesting, not circumventions, but more new configurations that enable us to run 2 Kubernetes clusters side by side while we perform the transition.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be the most difficult part. Alternatively, we could just turn off a cluster. All the traffic is sucked into B and C and say, let's rebuild D appropriately and, bring it back online and reconfigure things. But that's a little dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So kind of initial thoughts here is that we should certainly like start doing the steps to like find the network space, and like we can get the issues, put these into a plan, but roughly we should start figuring out like where would we get the network space from and how would we go ahead and do a migration strategy. At this time of year, we have a couple of interesting like holidays, I guess, coming up that can be useful. So for example, around Thanksgiving, that's not a holiday in Europe, but it's a super low traffic time for us. So that's a good time to do some of these bigger bits. We've also got the period around Christmas and end of year, which is less cool because it's a holiday for everyone, but it's also a slow, like super low traffic time. So I know we usually have PCLs around some of these, but certainly we could try and take advantage of some of these holiday times to have like lower times to like maybe bring something online and test it or something like that.
Something else to keep in mind is that, you know, if we get into a situation where we're running too many nodes, a mitigation factor we could apply is to create a new node pool, which are just these massive nodes, because then we could spread the amount of pods that we run into fewer nodes. So like there's mitigations we could put into place, but they're not future proof is what I'm trying to get to.
So
like
at some point we
to
have to do this, right? Is that the kind of the thing? Okay, great. Yeah. In terms of rough timing, what would be your kind of finger in the air of how long we have before we'd have to do this?
That's going to mostly depend on the scale of GitLab over the course of the future. I think at this point, because we've migrated the vast majority of our largest workloads, Pages isn't going to add a lot to this. I think from a technical perspective, we're over provisioned for the GitLab Pages work. So I think when that migrates over, we should see a minimal set of nodes pop into place here. So I don't know when we're going to run out.
Okay.
But it's something to keep in the back of our minds in case we start, you know, climbing with the number of nodes over the course of time. Like I just saw an alert fly through production indicating that one of our HPAs has hit its maximum. You know, the best course of action currently is just to, well, let's up the amount of pods. Well, if you up the amount of pods that you're going to run, that's going to up the amount of nodes that we need to run. So as long as we keep upping that number, we're going to be more at risk for running out of IP addresses for available nodes.
And is there some way we could alert when we get a bit closer? Like, is there something which we could have as a kind of once we are 75% out or something like that, we get an automated alert so that we don't miss this?
We don't have alerting currently, as far as I know, but that's something that we should be able to get that information and alert us on it. I think we'll have some hard-coded data inside of that alert, but it should be possible. Just count how many nodes we're running in each zone and say, hey, is this more or less than 250-ish? We'll have to figure out what that actual number is, but we could certainly add alerting. Yes.
Cool. Okay. Because yeah, I think that would be a good backup, right? So that just if we hit that alert, we could kind of have it as we would pause everything else and just jump on this if we got to that number. Okay, so some actions here. What do you think about us spinning this into an epic and then having issues underneath that for finding the network space, planning adding the alerts, planning out how we would go about doing a migration, and then we could actually link onto that the actual change requests and things when we come to make the change.
Yeah.
I
think that's good.
Cool. Do you mind taking that as an action as well, Scott?
Yeah, I could do that.
Super, thank you. Thanks for raising that up. Yeah. Do you know if we have anything else sort of along those lines?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I guess the only thing I could quickly think of is checking our quotas to make sure we're not hitting any sort of limits there.
Yes.
Because as far as I know, we've struggled greatly to get that sucked into Prometheus so we could alert on our quotas that are running out. But as far as I know, we haven't seen any issues lately. So hopefully that's not a big problem. And we also turned off the web fleet. So, we reclaimed some of our quota limits there.
Mhm. Okay.
But
great.
that's an ongoing thing that would affect all of us for everything. So that's the only thing I could think of off the top of my head.
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, that's good to know. Awesome. Okay, great. Is there anything else we want to go through today?
I'm curious if Alessio or Ruben have any sort of questions that they have at all. Any question? Anything at the top of your mind that's just like, huh?
I have one, but I don't know if it's what you had in mind. So I was going through an issue that Alessio opened, and I'm wondering what does it mean when you say running QA on a mixed deployment?
Running QA on a mixed deployment means that basically you have an environment which is split into stages, canary and the main stage, and you run a QA that selectively goes to both stages so that you can try to figure out if there is some incompatibility between the two versions.
So that necessitates that the canary and main have different versions.
Have different, yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's just run. Yeah, the purpose is testing backward compatibility. So
Okay.
the code has to be different. And my question, top of my head, was, why are you asking this, Garbek?
Because you haven't said anything this entire meeting. So I want to know what's going through your mind in regards to Kubernetes and the migration, man.
Okay, I was a bit distracted because I got back-to-back meeting, including a CI/CD panel with customers today. So yeah, that's why I was silent. But the IP exhaustion thing was kind of, no, I don't want to address this now. So I just blanked out when you started talking about this.
I have a question. Is it possible that we could use that? So one of the future dreams I have is blue-green deployments. But one thing that's tricky is the way we have our clusters built at the moment is it's not actually easy to destroy and spin them back up. And a lot of that, I believe, or at least my understanding at the time, was it's down to naming. And we've named them as pets. Java's very attached to the names he chose and is not super excited by them all having cruddy cattle names. But would this be, I mean, it might spin out the workload, but like, is there anything we can do to actually get a bit closer to having our clusters so they could be spun up and torn down?
That's a good question.
I was thinking that in terms of blue-green deployment of the application code, you don't need to destroy the cluster. You just create a new deployment within the cluster and just do the proxy thing. But if you also want to test Kubernetes configuration as well as Kubernetes configuration, basically, then it's a good proposal.
Cluster upgrades would be another prime example.
Yeah, that would be a super good one. Yeah.
You just have to move the proxy outside of Kubernetes, which we already are running outside of Kubernetes. So you need something outside that can orchestrate things. So you need an orchestrator for the orchestrator.
We need some sort of service bash. That way your proxy knows who to talk to whenever these changes come through.
I don't understand why we are not using console for this, actually, which is actually his job.
No comment.
Okay, that's what that would be.
Obviously, it's expensive. The other concern is that doing something like this is really expensive, especially with 5 deployments a day.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the big negative, right? In terms of why it would be hard to do is the cost for sure. Yeah.
But you've got auto scaling readily available for you. So, deploy to the green cluster, slowly ramp that up to 100%. And, the blue cluster gets ramped down to 0 and then repeat. So theoretically, your cost shouldn't change much, except for the fact that you have that hourly cost of you have another cluster running, which I think is like a nickel or a dime per hour or something like that. Yeah,
that's true. So you think like at some point you'd have like 50% of traffic on the blue one, 50% on the green one, but it's not different to having 100% on the blue one, right?
Yeah, but this is really a monolithic approach. So we are just trading clusters for VMs, which is not how you should operate Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is a commodity things where you just fit everything in, while we try to say, no, this is the cluster. This cluster is like a VM. This only runs front end. This only runs API. So it's, I mean, it's not really Kubernetes. You don't get the benefits of just fitting extra stuff in the empty spaces. Because if you run 1 pod per node, guess what? It's just VMs. You can do this by baking AMI images, AMI, not AMI, sorry, AMI, AMI images, and just spinning up new machines with cloud init functions, which was readily available way before Kubernetes was.
Mm-hmm.
So really what we need is for every deploy, a new cluster gets created with the new code, and then something tells HA proxy, use the IP addresses that we have for this cluster.
Interesting.
Why? So are you talking about the master node, the API master node, or you're talking about the application?
The pet situation with our clusters, because we're always creating new fresh clusters. We're not worrying about.
Yeah. No, my question is, are you referring to the Kubernetes master IP address, or are you referring about the IP address of the application?
Actual IP addresses to the services that are running on Kubernetes.
Okay. So in that case,
some of those we reserve.
It's just a matter of implementing meaningful readiness probe.
A good nomenclature as well, just to make sure we're plucking the right information out. Again, another use case for console.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that was a good thought experiment.
So it's good to ask though, right? Sometimes we uncover good stuff. Super. All right. So in which case, should we get 30 minutes back and give Alessio time to lie down for 30 minutes and revive?
Do we have the EMEA today, right?
Yeah, in 30 minutes. This is not unrelated to the lying down thing.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Come back fresh and ready. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for the discussions. I hope you all have a good 30 minutes. I'll see you shortly. Take care.